Right. Good morning, everybody, and a warm welcome to the second day of the IBF Sustainable Finance Virtual Fair. I hope that all of you were able to join some interesting and insightful sessions in day one. And I'm sure that the sessions from day one, it has now become quite clear what sustainable finance means to the financial services sector, but also how quickly it is becoming the center of how businesses are being run. Given the extent of efforts made so far, Singapore is already in a unique position to support a more sustainable economy, as well as Asia's transition to achieving its goal of becoming a low carbon economy by 2050. I think one of the most encouraging aspects of the evolution of this space in the sector is the emergence of the roles and skills that are going to be required by our future workforce. Developing sustainable finance skills has become universally important, and there is an urgency to build and grow these in order to stay relevant. And therefore, as part of my keynote speech today, I will cover some key trends that are shaping the future work within the sector and show you some live examples of how this is already being achieved across the economy in Singapore. I also want to walk you through some of the challenges of the sector and hear from you as practitioners on what you see as some of the risks and opportunities. So without further ado, let's jump right into today's agenda. As mentioned, I will start with the trends. We'll go through some challenges. We'll close out with a case study and do a bit of an introduction into the next session that follows this keynote. Singapore is already making strides in emerging as a leader in the global arena. The pursuit of sustainability had gained traction from the Paris 2015 Global Climate Conference, when nations globally made a commitment towards achieving net zero. The economy within Singapore has been an advocate for sustainable finance and has become a leading hub in Asia as well as internationally, and therefore is currently positioned to enable Asia to transition quite quickly into a low carbon economy. There has been a shift in the way in which investors recognize the importance of ESG, and they should be advocating for it. For Singapore, this journey began in 2019, when there was efforts to increase the financial sector's resilience to ESG risks, with the MAS committing almost $2 billion in investments in the Green Investments Program. And over the last few years, there have been several more regulations and initiatives that have been developed to support the cause, including the implementation guide for FI's climate-related disclosures. This was obviously in response to the ongoing global trend where countries were facing a major challenge to align around shared policies to drive green finance. With the rise in the demand for sustainabilities, you must have seen as an organization yourself or even an employee of the sector, the rising need for skills and capabilities and specialized skills in sustainable finance. You also must have realized that there is fierce competition in this space and there is a scarcity of talent. And therefore, to galvanize the efforts for talent growth perspective, in 2022, there was an establishment of 12 technical skills and competencies unique to sustainable finance as guidance for the FIs that was established by IBF and MAS. This was a much needed first step, which helps the industry understand the skills that are needed and therefore the potential jobs that will be an outcome of it. To continue growing as a leading international financial center in Asia, Singapore now needs to become future ready and also make its workforce future-proof, comprised with the right skills and capabilities in order to deliver on the country's commitment for 2050 net zero ambitions. I would like to take you further now through some of the global and local trends that we're seeing and how it's going to shape the economy and the workforce, and also walk you through a case study that we are pursuing with a large global bank in Singapore. But before we go into the details of the workforce, let's quickly look at some of the global trends that are shaping the ways in which organizations are remolding their business strategy. Starting with three main global trends, we see that green finance has experienced dramatic growth over the past decade. From a low base, rising from 5.2 billion in 2012, it has now become 540.6 billion in 2021. However, this still remains a very small part of the overall financing activities, and there is a prediction for this to continue to grow to over 37.34 trillion in 2022, which is approximately 1.5% of the current market. And I'm just going to throw these stats out there so you can keep your eye on them. Understanding how the scale of sustainable finance in the market is going to continue to grow. The second one I wanted to call out is the product dominated market and how green finance remains heavily dominated by green bond issuance. Green bonds have accounted so far for 93.1% of total green finance globally over the period of 2012 to 21. This issuance increased from 2.3 billion in 2012 to 511.5 billion in 2021. Cumulatively, global green bond issuance has now totaled to 1.4 trillion between that period of 2012 to 2021. Again, a huge number and a whopping number to consider as we think about the evolution of the sector, what types of skills and jobs are going to be required going forward. And lastly, what I did want to call out is the use of sustainable finance instruments in APAC. However, APAC still remains relatively nascent as compared to Europe. Europe has always been leading, and over the last 10 years, the overall growth of sustainable finance instruments in Europe has been faster paced than it has been in this region. However, we are seeing this pace picking up with 81% growth in 2018-2019, and also 5% penetration of the total debt market in 2019 for the sustainable finance instruments. Now, I'm just going to get you to anchor on these three from a global context. And what we're going to see is how these global trends then trickle down or are starting to get mirrored in the local landscape within Singapore. And these numbers will start seeming more familiar to you. There has been a rapid growth, therefore, over the recent years on the types of product development in, sorry. There has been rapid growth over recent years in new product development in banking, insurance, and asset management products across Singapore, with a 300% increase in the number of transactions being delivered between 2015 to 2020. Also, there's been a 65% increase in the number of transactions from 2018 to 2019. And you see this across all three large segments of the financial services sector. Singapore has also been way ahead of the curve as compared to its APAC counterparts that I mentioned to you earlier, where we are seeing that it is able to keep up to pace with what is happening in the global economy. More than 15% penetration growth of the total debt market is in 2019 that has been achieved so far, and Singapore accounts for more than half of the cumulative green bonds and loan insurances in the ASEAN region. Lastly, in terms of the adoption of sustainable finance products, it is expected to increase across all sectors, especially in the high carbon emission sector, something that becomes very relevant in this part of the world. Given that the manufacturing industry position is a strong contributor to the economy of Singapore, with it being one of the highest carbon emitters, it is predicted that sustainable finance products will start to see a fast-paced adoption in the near future. MAS also predicts that there will be a yearly $200 billion investment in sustainable finance products moving forward. Now, I appreciate I have thrown out to you quite a lot of statistics about global growth in sustainable finance products and services, as well as what we're expecting to see in the local market. And you're probably wondering, so how do these then translate into how our practitioners can translate these into skills and capabilities and deliver what the sector needs? Obviously, we're starting to think about what that means in terms of talent. What does it mean in terms of reskilling and upskilling? And how do we then address these needs, which are becoming quite imminent? A lack of expertise is starting to be seen across different FIs as a common struggle. And organizations have started to acknowledge that there is a knowledge action gap. Even though there is an acknowledgement there isn't much awareness on how to bridge this gap. So what do we do when we think about our business strategy and the implications on our workforce strategy? Businesses are now starting to explore different ways of talent acquisition. There is a scarcity of this population of individuals who understand sustainability and sustainable finance in the open market, and therefore the most effective and sustainable way, no pun intended, of keeping this a continued strategy for an organization to stay relevant is through reskilling and upskilling for long term. The global and local markets see a proportionate increase in demand for roles that need specialized green skills, and therefore there is increasing hiring opportunities relating to green finance. And you can see this in the evidence across the numbers that you see on your screen, where 8% globally, there has been an annual growth for specialized green skills, jobs that are being posted over the last 5 years. To counter that, locally, there have been 9,400 new hiring opportunities related to green finance that are specifically available just in Singapore. Despite these jobs that are growing, you're probably wondering, okay, how do we then find out what are the relevant skills that are required to then execute on these jobs? And 77% of individuals or finance professionals globally report that there is a sustainability skills shortage at their organizations. Locally, 81% of your employees in Singapore say that they acknowledge and are ready to learn new skills to meet the sector's changing demand. So there is definitely a hunger and a turn towards people wanting to adopt and adapt to these changing requirements of their organizations. But what they do see, while 81% of them agree that they want to learn these new skills, is that they may not be empowered by their employees just yet. And this is not something to be worried about, because employers need not necessarily know what it is in terms of the requirements that the organization needs and the sector needs in order to help their employees come up to speed. There is therefore a need to rethink how you enable and reshape your workforce. So there are three main ways in which that we can achieve this. One, obviously, which I have been talking about right from the beginning of my presentation, is around reskilling and upskilling. What you will see is that 40% of institutional investors in Asia are held back from more ESG-based investing due to the shortage of expertise or qualified staff. And I think a lot of you did already highlight this, that we don't have the skills and the capabilities. But how do we then move forward without this becoming an impediment for our organization? We consider implementing transformational, organizational-wide upskilling programs, where we start with strategic workforce planning. And strategic workforce planning entails that we start to think about what it means from a talent acquisition standpoint, what it means from a headcount perspective of the types of roles and skills that are required, and we identify opportunities for internal redeployment, job rotations, and career progressions for individuals within our organization. And this has already been done at scale by lots of organizations when it came to the digital transformation that started to happen about 3 to 4 years ago across the sector, where individuals who required skills around terminologies that were not known to us in data analytics, or call it blockchain, crypto assets, AI, ML, started to see how their organizations enabled them through reskilling and upskilling programs, gave them the opportunities for redeployment into new roles that were emerging, and allowed them to do job rotations so they could see if they had the capabilities in order to deliver on those roles. It also created separate career pathways for career progression, which was outside the traditional roles and responsibilities that an individual came into at the beginning of their career. So that's definitely one way to tackle it. The second way to tackle it is to look at it from an enhanced ways of working. What we see is 24 million jobs are expected to be created globally as a result of moving into the green economy. And a new ecosystem of subject matter experts across ESG will warrant new skills and jobs, making it a vital role for organizations in order to deliver bespoke solutions. So what we do in terms of being able to tackle that is mapping organizations' job descriptions and future roles. And a way to start is something that I mentioned when I was taking you through the initiatives that Singapore has already taken, is through the IBF and MAS Sustainable Finance Technical Skills and Competencies that have already been shared with the industry as guidance on how to start this process. Once roles are identified, you then find ways of assessing individuals to become fit for those roles. And once you determine their skills gaps, reskilling and upskilling opportunities can be determined in order to enable them through different career transitions. So that's the second way to tackle it. The third way is to explore alternative resourcing channels. The gig economy has been something that has been leveraged over the last few years to counter the redundancies that have been created by digital economies. And similarly, this is where gig workers can again be leveraged for sustainable finance and sustainability skills and capabilities. Tapping into the gig economy and exploring how you can fill some of your sustainable finance roles with professionals outside of the sector is something that should be explored. Following guidelines and frameworks effectively from the gig economy is something that is a first step that can be taken while you start to consider what your workforce transformation objectives and strategies look like for the future, which are longer term. These were some of the ways in which we wanted to bring out to you the capabilities that can be delivered across organizations and how organizations are thinking about transforming themselves in order to meet the sustainable finance requirements. I did want to share with you, as an outcome of this, a case study of workforce transformation that a global bank that we're working with is currently going through. Now, a bit of a context about this bank. This bank is global with a large population size and has market presence over 60 plus markets globally. What they realized is due to rapid job displacement in sustainable finance, and because there was a need to develop skills and capabilities around sustainable finance goods and services, they needed to start considering what the future roles were for their organization, and therefore how to then equip their workforce with the future skills that were aligned to their net zero targets and ambitions. In order to do this, their ask of us was to help them to deliver a workforce strategy which looked at the end-to-end value chain. When we talk about the end-to-end value chain, we refer to an updation not just of their skills and capabilities framework, but looking overall at their organization design, seeing how that then mirrors into their job families and their skills taxonomies and what it means from a upliftment and redefinition of their technical skills and competencies for a future-ready workforce. It also allowed for us to understand what the employee skills landscape looks like, because they wanted to understand what it meant from the industry requirements and the understanding of individual skills and capabilities. So conducting skills assessments to develop the right job profiles in order to make it bespoke for career transitions for the individual employees within their organization. We've also enabled them to look at different types of career pathways. So for example, looking at some of the traditional roles within financial services, which are starting to become redundant, i.e. credit analyst roles, some risk analyst roles in the traditional context. How do those then evolve into ESG risk analyst roles? And how do we then enable employees to go into those ESG roles through different upskilling and reskilling pathways? We've also looked as an alternative to reskill and upskilling and what the strategic hiring plan should be for this global bank. Because as I mentioned, while reskill and upskilling should be the strategy that organizations leverage at best, there are still some roles which are very, very specific and very specialized. And for that, we will need to start to look to the market to recruit this talent. And so this workforce strategy program is now equipping the global bank to think through the necessary roles and skills, including the technology implications and the sustainable finance implications to be ready for the future trends in the market. This is something that not just one bank, but all banks and insurers, as well as asset managers, are starting to think about, because the workforce forms the baseline of how your products and services are getting delivered within the context of the services that you provide. So from that context, it's important to keep thinking about what it means for your workforce and how you therefore then enable your workforce to be future-proofed and to be future-ready. I'd like to now close off with a very, very short video to set the stage of what is to come for the rest of the day.
What if we only had today to change tomorrow? ESG is more than ticking boxes and good intentions. It's about smarter business for a stronger world. We are a community of solvers, combining knowledge, humanity, and technology to change uncertainty into curiosity, complexity into clarity, and problems into potential. Moving as one to solve for the next in real time, capturing new possibilities to turn theory into action, to transform inside for the outside, and move forward with measurable success. Creating sustained outcomes that fuel responsible growth and build greater trust for generations to come. Trust earned by imagining and making real a future where sustainability is at the heart of business, net zero is the norm, and transparency is a given. Let's create meaningful change for your people, customers, communities, and the world. It's time to step forward. Are you ready?
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. And I hope that you're looking forward to an exciting segment and panel discussions that will be happening through the rest of the day. I hope that this introduction has helped to set the stage for you for what is to come in the sector and help you to understand how you can start to think about the skills and capabilities within your organization. I will now hand over to the next speaker for the day, who will be taking you through a deep dive of the asset and wealth management industry and what it means for sustainable investment in the financial services sector. Thank you once again for your time. I appreciate your participation.